was really important to us to end on a high note with Halo 3.
Send me out with a bang.
Halo 3 was going to be the end of the trilogy. We knew that we had to do it better than we did Halo 2. So it was going to be a focused, concerted effort throughout to make sure that Halo 3 was the jewel on the crown.
By 2007, the Halo series was a phenomenon. The first game was the new Xbox console's killer app, a major statement for Microsoft as it entered the home console market for the very first time. Halo 2 had its own objective, the Xbox Live's killer app and bring online multiplayer on consoles to brand new heights. No pressure. Both games passed these tests with flying colors. Ultimately, the series had become an established name and a massive success on Microsoft's first home console. But, as everyone always asks, what's next? Halo 2 ended with Master Chief promising to finish the fight. This was just as much a promise from a character in a story as from the storytellers themselves. A promise to make good on the potential of Halo 2 next time, particularly with the campaign. Its iconic multiplayer garnered goodwill from critics and fans alike, but there was of course room for improvement. Expectations would be even higher for Halo's third entry. Bungie had to ensure that development like Halo 2's would never happen again.
It's a much more harrowing process than I think most of the fans understand.
One positive development change, in theory, was one that Bungie themselves had no control over. Microsoft said goodbye to the original Xbox and hello to Xbox 360 in 2005. Halo 3 would use this improved hardware to its advantage, theoretically avoiding the limitations that plagued Halo 2. Theoretically.
The biggest challenge in front of us was how were we going to convert these assets from Halo 2 into this next-gen HD content.
I don't think there are any developers who are happy that it's a high-def world now. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just a pain in the ass for all of us.
You have to scale up. We need to have 4 times the size of textures, 4 times as much content, just to create the same experience that we had with Halo 1 and Halo 2.
As mentioned in the Making of Halo 3 documentary, the game had a full year of pre-production, something Halo 2 lacked. The documentary gives far fewer details about the larger dev issues than Halo 2's, but quite a bit can still be gleaned. It's most notable to me that Jason Jones, Bungie's founder and director of Halo 1 and 2, is absent from this doc. He was largely absent from Halo 3's development as a whole until the final stages, taking an extended sabbatical after Halo 2 finally shipped. He ultimately would return to the team, but he's been described as distant, disinterested, and more focused on developing something new for Bungie during this time. The first 2 games were hardly singular displays of Jason Jones as an auteur, but there was a clearer chain of command in place on Halo 2 than Bungie had for Halo 3. Marty O'Donnell stated, "We convinced everybody that all the magic sauce came from Jason. There's a bunch of really creative, strong-minded individuals fighting." Joe Staten theorized that many different Bungie employees wanted to be Halo 3's project lead. Large-scale decisions and the shape of the story were made by committee, attempting to gel several different visions into one. Halo 3 may have had the development time its predecessor lacked, but things were still not going smoothly.
We're shipping on a new box, we've got all this new tech, we're kind of rewriting the engine, we've got higher def. You know, everybody was fighting over all the new memory, all the new processing power. You know, where was it going to go? Was it going to go to graphics? Was it going to go to AI?
At the same time, while Bungie couldn't decide on the direction of Halo 3, their relationship with Microsoft had begun to sour. Disagreements over profit sharing and the overall direction of the franchise led to tense negotiations between Halo's creators and its owners. Microsoft had lofty goals for Halo beyond the Master Chief. More games from different genres were discussed, as well as more novels and a feature film, which ultimately never came to be. The two sides ultimately came to an agreement.
The deal was essentially, we make a couple more Halo games, we leave Halo with Microsoft, and we can split amicably. So, I mean, ultimately the price of our freedom was to leave our baby behind, to move from being Halo developers to Halo fans.
As for the game itself, development had finally started to make some progress. The story committee presented its outline to the 7 leads at Bungie, optimistic about their ideas for Halo's grand finale. Marty O'Donnell, a jack of all trades at Bungie at this point, was not so enthused.
We write the first draft of the script, but it's not great. Man, do I really want to give all this credit to Marty?
I didn't see any shape to this story. Nothing happy, nothing sad, nothing intense.
You actually want to get to the point where the player goes, well, wait a minute, I've been this character for 3 games. They can't possibly kill me.
His ultimate solution to this issue was one we'll discuss as we go through the campaign. He described the ideas he provided as plot points, but not an overall story. Regardless of these admitted shortcomings, the team moved forward with the new outline, with Joe Staten back to write cinematics and dialogue. Things moved forward, but with so many cooks in the kitchen, no one seemed particularly happy with the dish. While the story's development was the subject of endless disagreement, things were going smoother on the gameplay side. The game still had its crunch, but nothing like Halo 2's. The gameplay and design benefited from the bigger staff and left the Bungie veterans to focus on big picture. New hardware meant more refined gameplay, animations, and cutscenes. Innovations were added to both single-player and multiplayer. Campaign scoring would create competition and replay value in single player, and souls from Halo 2 would return. Whatever faults Halo 3 would have, steps were taken to ensure gameplay would not be one of them. With things finally sorted out, it was time to build the excitement. The hype for Halo 2 was big, but the hype for Halo 3 was unprecedented. Its expensive and expansive marketing campaign even has its own Wikipedia entry if that tells you anything. Gears of War was a 360's first huge exclusive in 2006 and became the most popular game on Xbox Live for a time, but Halo 3 was made to be the 360's true system seller. The hype train left the station at E3 2006, with Halo 3 officially announced thanks to a cinematic teaser. The teaser gives your first glimpse of the Earth terrain seen in the game's first half and foreshadows Cortana's involvement, before revealing Master Chief and showing the Covenant fleet on Earth.
This is the way the world ends.
The trailer confirmed a 2007 release and established the game's iconic and now ironic slogan, "Finish the fight." The marketing push continued with the Starry Night commercial, directed by Top Gun Maverick director Joseph Kosinski. This ad mixes live action and CG, using children looking up at the stars as a framing device to show more of Halo 3, this time in a CG environment. Chief uses a new addition to the game, the Bubble Shield, before storming an entire Covenant armada in one of Halo's most enduring and iconic images to this day. At E307, Bungie showed off a gameplay trailer narrated by Terrence Stamp, the new voice of the Prophet of Truth.
Your world will burn until its surface is but glass.
This trailer showed off tons of new features of the game, including dismounting turrets, missile pods, the Mongoose, Brute Chieftains, Gravity Hammer, choppers, equipment, and overhauled Scarab, just to name a few. Just a few months away, this trailer did a great job showing gamers how the newest entry in the series would take advantage of the new hardware and innovate in gameplay to continue expanding and refining Halo. Halo 3's final big marketing push was its iconic video series titled Believe. The videos honor Master Chief through the lens of the Museum of Humanity, with a diorama monument depicting a battlefield from around the time of the game. Interviews with Marines from the games build context for the battle, and the final trailer takes us through the diorama itself. In the center, Master Chief is held up by a Brute Chieftain before coming to life. The Believe campaign as a whole cost $10 million, a significant chunk of the overall $40 million spent on marketing Halo 3. Halo 3's marketing materials had a distinct focus on adding to the myth of the Master Chief. As if there were any doubt, I think this is officially the point where Master Chief as a figure became the undisputed face of Xbox. Halo 3's concerted effort to mythicize him in this way went a long way to accomplishing that goal. As a final push to make Halo 3 feel huge and important, it was undeniably a success. Success in Halo 3 became immediately synonymous upon its release in September 2007. The game made $170 million in its first day on sale, becoming the biggest single-day entertainment launch of all time at the time. It made $300 million by the end of the week and sold over 3 million units in its first month. It ultimately became the best-selling game in 2007 in the United States, selling 8.1 million copies domestically and over 12 million copies worldwide. It's the best-selling non-pack-in Xbox 360 exclusive. Look, I refuse to live in a world where Connected Adventures of all games is the best-selling Xbox 360 game ever. You're not Wii Sports, and you never will be, dude. Halo 3 was destined to be a success, following up a tremendously popular game on a new console that was outdoing its predecessor. Like the first two games, it was this console's killer app. There's never any doubt that this game would be a success, but was that success warranted? Did Bungie stick the landing on their trilogy like they so badly wanted to do? Was Halo 3 the best Halo game yet? There's only one way to find out. This is Halo 3. Halo 2 left off with Master Chief and Cortana separated for the very first time. Halo 3 makes her separation a primary focus from moment one. Her voice is still in our heads, even though she's far away. She acts as Chief's driving force in this game, never escaping his brain for too long. How the game accomplishes this is something. While she's narrating, two twinkles in the sky diverge. One crashes in the jungle. You know who it is. Johnson and his Marines find Chief, giving us our new tutorial section, one that's even further streamlined from Halo 2. Before you get turned loose, Halo 3's other central relationship is established. The Arbiter reveals himself, and we get a very tense reunion.
Chief, wait! The Arbiter's with us! Come on now. We've got enough to worry about without you two trying to kill each other.
Were it so easy.
Arbiter's still important in Halo 3, but his role is diminished. He's no longer a playable protagonist and carries significantly less importance to the story. He's just a companion for much of the campaign, and in co-op, he's your player 2 rather than Master Chief, but he's not a protagonist anymore. I don't have a problem with him no longer being playable, but I do wish he had more to do here. He gets his big moment later in the game, but Halo 3 never really develops his conflict with truth beyond what we saw in the last game. Halo 3 throws you right into things and never really looks back. You don't learn what happened with Chief on the Forerunner ship. You just know that he's back with the UNSC, back on Earth, and go. Following up a cliffhanger by basically ignoring that cliffhanger is certainly one approach to things. You quickly learn that Covenant squads are now led by Brutes. Brutes were an underdeveloped adversary in Halo 2. As the primary enemy type now in Halo 3, they were given the focus that they previously lacked. In Halo 2, you could kill them with just a few headshots. Now, they're shielded like elites, but their shields aren't rechargeable. If you take those shields down, you can wait as long as you need to before you hit them with that final killing blow. They can still charge you like in Halo 2, but it's less frequent and not as overpowered as before. Brutes also have a new primary weapon, the debuting Spiker. It's dual wieldable and much better at getting kills as a primary weapon than the plasma rifle was in the last two games. I'm still partial to the UNSC suite of weapons in Halo 3, including the returning assault rifle. My bread and butter in multiplayer is to use the assault rifle before getting a close threat melee kill, and it works well in campaign too. Unfortunately, this does mean the SMG takes a backseat though, and by extension, so does dual wielding as a whole. You can still dual wield the SMG, Magnum, Plasma Rifle, Plasma Pistol, Spiker, and the new Mauler, but the combinations feel less effective than they did in the last game. The Needler also can't be dual wielded anymore, eliminating the most powerful option. My own playstyle, especially in campaign, is skewed toward headshot weapons, but I still like the added element that dual wielding brought to combat. Having more options to approach a battle is not a bad thing, and while it's nice that dual wielding is still here, there's no getting around that it feels de-emphasized in Halo 3. It hasn't returned to the series since, and each new game gives us hope for a brief moment before brought back down to reality. Later in the level, Chief receives a message of sorts from Cortana.
Could you sacrifice me to complete your mission? Could you watch me die?
Sir, you okay? Your vitals just pinged KIA.
This is the only time these moments are acknowledged by anyone else in the game. Halo 3's way of reminding you that Cortana is still out there is to have her periodically interrupt you. Your movement slows down and she delivers a very cryptic line or two of dialogue in your head. This thankfully doesn't happen in the middle of gameplay because you can't just create an unfair gameplay scenario like that outside the player's control, but it also does highlight a shortcoming of the storytelling idea. Cortana being in Chief's head doesn't actually seem to really affect him in any way. As a silent protagonist during gameplay, he can't just comment on what's happening to him or how it's affecting him. Ultimately, the messages themselves are so cryptic that they don't really contribute anything except serving as a very annoying reminder that Cortana does still exist. I can't help but think a more elegant solution really did exist somewhere here. Unfortunately, these moments happen throughout the game in nearly every level, often on multiple occasions per level, and they get very old very quickly. I've talked about gameplay a lot here at the outset because it really does take center stage in Halo 3. It sounds obvious to say, but I remember Halo 3 for its core gameplay more than any other game in the series. For my money, Halo 3's gameplay feels more balanced than the first two games. It's incredibly fine-tuned. The pacing and variety of each gameplay scenario feels better than ever here, and makes up for the backseat that the story takes. CR117 doesn't accomplish much from a story standpoint, and if the game started with the next mission, things wouldn't feel much different. This mission is still a success thanks to how well it introduces all the new gameplay elements. It also accomplishes all this without being as cramped as the tight quarters of the UNSC ships in the first two games. Halo 3 doesn't truly open up until the third mission, but it feels less restrictive from the get-go. You meet your first Brute Chieftain in this mission. Chieftains operate as mini-bosses in most levels, and they use powerful weapons like the Gravity Hammer, which makes its playable debut here. It's an incredibly powerful and fun melee weapon, a one-hit kill at close range with situational strengths and weaknesses compared to the other melee weapon, the Energy Sword. When we meet our first Chieftain, they've captured Johnson and his team, which the game uses as a chance to show off one of its other main goals, integrating story into the gameplay. While I did say earlier that the mission doesn't accomplish much for the overall story of Halo 3, it does fit some subtle storytelling moments into the gameplay thanks to its scripted in-game story moments. Early on, you encounter a Brute interrogating a Marine. If you're able to save the Marine in time, he tells you what happened to his team and joins you for the rest of the mission.
Brute Chieftain. Phantom. pinned us down. Killed my men.
Later, you see Banshees take down Johnson's Pelican, and when you finally do see Johnson, he's captured by the Chieftain. This cutscene takes place in real time. If you skip it, the Chieftain and Johnson's scripted interaction is still going to play out exactly the same, but in-game instead of during the cutscene. None of this is mind-blowing, but these little things do add to the immersion and help make up for the game's lack of focus on plot and characterization. After you kill the Chieftain, you evac with Johnson and head to Crow's Nest. Here we get reunited with Miranda Keyes, now voiced by Justice Bolding instead of Julie Benz.
Truth could have landed anywhere, but he committed all his forces here, East Africa, the ruins of New Mombasa.
She's not the only character with a new voice actor, though, as we're interrupted by the Prophet of the Truth, now voiced by Terrence Stamp, replacing Michael Wincott from Halo 2.
Lord Hood, let him know.
All of you vermin, cowering in the dirt, thinking, what, I wonder, that you might escape the coming fire? No, your world will burn until its surface is but glass.
Historically, I like Terrence Stamp as an actor in film, but his performance just doesn't compare to Michael Wincott's in my opinion. There's a radical shift in the presentation of Truth as a character here. He's dumbed down into a far more conventional, over-the-top megalomaniac character, and it takes away almost all of what made him interesting in my opinion. Michael Wincott's performance has an inherent charisma that Terrence Stamp's performance just lacks by comparison, and the overall stronger writing in Halo 2 does make you believe that his political maneuvering could actually happen in that universe. It reminds me a lot of Palpatine in the Star Wars prequels, which coincidentally were happening at the same time as the Bungie trilogy. Truth from Halo 2 to Halo 3 feels like if we went from the early scenes of Palpatine as a senator in Phantom Menace directly to his hammiest moments in Return of the Jedi, but without a good justification for the character shift. I've seen the argument before that now that Truth has the full power that he wanted in Halo 2, he finally shows his true colors, but I still don't think that justifies this complete change in demeanor. You can't convince me that this would have been the same writing of the character if Michael Wincott had come back for this game, and I much prefer what we had there versus what we have now. The interruption by Truth precedes a Covenant assault on Crow's Nest, and the mission that we get here really does feel like the first level in a Halo game, with the Covenant assaulting a UNSC base and Master Chief having to aid in everyone's escape.
Ma'am, squad leaders are requesting a rally point. Where should they go?
To war.
This is one of the less enjoyable missions in Halo 3 in my opinion. It's one of only 2 missions in the game that features significant backtracking. You visit the Ops Center on 3 different occasions and have to go back to the hangar twice in this level. Each experience is at least different once you get there, but it does hurt the pacing. You get to encounter 3 different brute chieftains in this level, and while they at least all have different weapons, the level still does feel repetitive. Your ultimate objective in this level is to arm a bomb to destroy Crow's Nest. After killing the 3rd and final chieftain, you arm it and narrowly escape the destruction in time. In the 3rd mission, Salvo Highway, you regroup with Marines and escape in a vehicle convoy as the gameplay finally opens up. You start in Warthogs, encountering waves of enemies and making distance between yourself and the base. This is one of the easiest missions in Halo 3 to speed right through if you so desire. You eventually go on foot and defend an outpost against a chieftain and a wraith before you're given another Warthog for some reason. I always abandon the Warthog here because this is where you encounter choppers for the first time. Choppers handle terribly, but they do a lot of damage and are extremely effective against both infantry and vehicles. Of the 2 new brute vehicles that Halo 3 adds, this is my preferred one. The last phase of this level is another vehicle-heavy section as you destroy multiple wraiths and choppers en route to a tunnel guarded by yet another chieftain. After defeating the chieftain, you're finally linked back up with the UNSC, and it's almost time to begin your assault on Truth's ship. This is another fairly inconsequential mission in terms of story advancement, but it's undeniably a fun one. Our 4th mission, The Storm, is all about taking out anti-air guns so the UNSC fleet can make their assault on Truth. This is one of the best paced missions in the entire franchise in my opinion. It seamlessly transitions you from tight quarters to open vehicle combat, and with all varieties of enemy and vehicle types along the way. Just when things are starting to feel a bit repetitive, you encounter a Scarab. Halo 2's Scarab is infamous for being a cool idea that was executed horribly. It's imposing and effectively built up in that game, but the experience of taking it down was underwhelming.
The Scarab was in Halo 2, but it was very scripted.
The way it was actually implemented in the game was boring as hell.
The design was horrible. Like it looked like a basket. Like a handle? I'm going shopping. It's horrible.
When you're fighting the Scarab in Halo 2, you had to kill the 2 guys that were driving it, and then you died in a cutscene. That was pretty cool, but it wasn't part of the sandbox. One of the first things we were looking at for Halo 3 was, let's give it an AI, let's let it move about the environment completely freely, let's make it part of the sandbox.
So we want to make it as interactive as possible.
Like the brutes, Scarabs have been overhauled and are much more enjoyable to fight this time around. Now you do actually get to fight them yourself. If you have the firepower, you can disable its joints so it stops moving for a limited time. You can also attempt to time your boarding correctly, giving you options for how you want to approach it. Once you're on board, you have to destroy the power core, and after you do, you have a limited time to escape and clear the blast radius to avoid taking damage. It's a much more involved process this time, and a very enjoyable one. After you take down the Scarab, you're rejoined by the Arbiter for the final stretch of this level, after he was absent for most of the previous two. There's one last big AA battery to destroy, with a few chieftains and hunters blocking your path. After you get through them and destroy the battery, the ways finally pay for the assault on Truth. But then...
This is the way the world ends.
New contact slipping in.
What is it? More brutes?
Worse.
Okay, but Arbiter should know that's the Flood, right? I complained about the backtracking in Crow's Nest, but Floodgate does take it to the extreme, making you backtrack through the entire area you literally just played through in the Storm. I should hate this level because of that, but it's given new life thanks to the arrival of the Flood. The Flood were not fun at all to fight in Halo 2, so their arrival should also be a negative here. Fortunately, they were also overhauled in a myriad of enjoyable ways, just like the Scarab was. There's greater variety in enemy types in the first two games, and every weapon does actually feel viable against them again, which I could not say for Halo 2. It's still best to use the sword here, even without the crazy lunge mechanic that Halo 2 had. Combat with the Flood just feels more dynamic than it has before, and it's one of Halo 3's greatest strengths compared to its predecessors. I must say, seeing the Flood finally invade Earth is very effective. The Marines that are left over from the last mission are infected in front of your very eyes if you don't kill the Flood spores fast enough. We encounter a Marine here that reminds us of a similar encounter in Halo 1's campaign.
They were all infected. I could see it crawling, sliding around beneath their skin. Oh. And then they got up, started to talk. Oh God, their voices. Oh God, no, make them stop.
Just when you feel like all might be lost, the cavalry arrives.
Hail humans and take heed. This is the carrier, Shadow of Intent. Clear this sector while we deal with the Flood.
Fighting alongside both the Arbiter and the Elites as Master Chief helps show the desperation of the entire situation, both against the Covenant and the Flood. The Elites claim that Cortana's aboard that crashed Flood ship, and you enter the belly of the beast to find her. Before you reach her, you're interrupted by the Gravemind in a similar manner to what Cortana's interruptions have done throughout the game. Once you finally reach her, she's immediately pulled away before you're greeted by a familiar foe. Or is he?
Reclaimer.
Chief reluctantly lets the light bulb take Cortana back to the shipmaster as we see his fleet glassing half of Africa to prevent the spread of the Flood. This moment, like a lot of the Earth stuff in this game, isn't given nearly as much gravitas as it probably should have been. It provides our only real moment of tension between the humans and Elites as well, but nothing really comes from it. On the ship, all that can be recovered is a message from Cortana. She urges Chief to follow Truth through the portal, promising a solution on the other side to stop the Flood. Lord Hood fears it's a trap and stays behind, but the humans and the Covenant ultimately follow Truth through. This marks the end of the Earth invasion story that started in Halo 2. As a big selling point for that game, it only had 2 dedicated missions, which left a lot of fans disappointed. In Halo 3, 5 of the 9 gameplay levels are on Earth, but it still feels like they left a lot of meat on the bone from a story standpoint, especially given how Halo 2 ended. Luckily for those who wanted more Earth in their Halo games, the next entry had them covered. Ultimately, the Earth levels make up the first half of Halo 3, and very little happens from a story standpoint within them. The real meat of this story is through the portal. On the other side of the portal, the Covenant and Elite fleets fight while Chief is immediately taken to the surface of the Ark. The goal of this mission is to reach a cartographer to pinpoint Truth's location for the final assault. The Ark just might be my favorite Halo level, period. It's immaculately paced with a ton of variety. In the early stages, you're sniping, quietly going through the first 2 waves of the Covenant. Then vehicles get involved, with more of the Chopper and the Prowler, the other brute vehicle, akin to a Warthog or the Spectre from Halo 2. This section culminates in you taking out an anti-air wraith, which allows the forward unto Dawn to land on the surface of the Ark in one of the game's most impressive moments of spectacle.
Look! Up high! Here she comes! Is the Dawn rated for atmosphere?
gonna find out. Hey, take cover!
Thanks, Chief. Wouldn't have lasted much longer up there. Come to the back of the frigate. Johnson, have the elites found anything?
Structure on the other side of the wall, man. But it's surrounded by a brute heavy armor.
Don't worry, I've got a plan.
You're rewarded with a Scorpion, where you can experience one of the game's other classic moments.
Tank beats ghost.
Hunters! Well, thank you for your timely...
Tank beats hunter. Tank beats everything. Oh, man. I could do this all day.
The Ark doesn't take itself too seriously, and it's all the better for it. You encounter another Scarab later on in the mission, and you have a few ways of approaching it. You can take a side route down with the Warthog, or go straight up the middle with the tank. For me, the tank is easiest for hobbling the Scarab, and you can also take out the power core without boarding it if your aim is good. The last stretch of this level takes you back to close quarters in a Forerunner facility, where you find the Cartographer after fighting multiple chieftains on the way. This last section is the least enjoyable stretch of the Ark, but it's by no means bad. The rest of the level is just so perfectly paced that a series of repetitive tight quarters encounters is not the most exciting way to cap things off. With the intel finally acquired, it's time to finish the fight. Storming the beach in the next mission, the Covenant, evokes memories of Halo 1's Silent Cartographer opening. This level introduces the Spartan Laser, an effective power weapon that requires you to focus your reticle for a few seconds before it fires. You use it here to take out turrets and another AA Wraith before you storm the first tower. The opening stages of this level do feel a bit repetitive because you have 2 towers to disable before you can get to Truth. Johnson's team goes silent at his tower, and it forces you to ascend the tower yourself. You make your way there in a Hornet, which is a new UNSC air vehicle that only sees its use in this mission. It can take a long time, but you can destroy pretty much anything with the Hornet, including Phantoms. It's fun, but it's ultimately a forgettable inclusion in this game, and the series never really did find a truly great UNSC equivalent to the Banshee that the Covenant have. Once you reach the second tower, that thorn in your side comes back yet again. The Flood adds even more to the sense of urgency in the late stages of this level. Here, in a chapter fittingly titled Journey's End, you make your final assault on Truth and the Citadel, going through the Flood and 2 Scarabs along the way. We learn here that Johnson has been captured by Truth, who needs a human to help him activate the Ark. Miranda intervenes, but she's killed by Truth in a very odd moment that we'll discuss a little bit more later. Truth begins the activation sequence, and all hope seems lost as we see how far Chief and Arbiter are from him. The most unlikely of alliances forms here as the Gravemind of all people tells Chief that the Flood will help him get to Truth. This, frankly, is an insane moment that the game ends up glossing over so quickly that I legit forget it happens every time I play. It should be the ultimate signifier of the urgency of the situation, but ultimately it feels kind of like an afterthought, especially given how quickly they end up betraying Chief after this. When you finally do reach Truth, you see the Flood have gotten to him first. Before he can succumb to his Flood infection, Arbiter seizes the moment that he's been waiting for so long.
I am Truth, the voice of the Covenant.
So, you must be silenced.
The moment is still cathartic, but with the lack of focus both characters got in Halo 3, it really doesn't hit like it should. We don't really get a chance to savor it because, shocker, the Flood betrayed Chief and Arbiter here. You backtrack through the Citadel, fighting the Flood along the way before you finally reunite with Guilty Spark. Here we see...
Replacement. The ring you destroyed.
When did you know?
During the Ark mission, we learned that this side of the portal was beyond the rim of our galaxy, and this becomes very important here as Chief and Guilty Spark agree to light this replacement Halo. To do so, Chief has to find an old friend. As a 9-year-old playing this game for the very first time, I hated this level with a passion. I got lost constantly, and while I know my way around it today, it's still easily the game's lowest point from a gameplay standpoint. The Flood are still more fun to fight than they once were, but they're less fun than the Covenant, and the Covenant are not going to be an enemy for the rest of this game. The close quarters nature of High Charity as a location also doesn't help. This level's nowhere near as tedious as Halo 1's library, but it's still as close as Halo 3's gameplay gets. Thankfully, this mission is not nearly as long and tedious, and the second half of the level leading into the ultimate reunion with Cortana is effective. The big negative for me is that this level is by far the worst defender of the Cortana and Gravemind interruptions. Both characters are in your head constantly throughout, and like I said before, I understand why the story element's here, but it's still an annoyance, and in this level, it's a constant one. After you ignore Gravemind's pleas over and over and over again, you finally reach Cortana and find her for real this time.
You found me. But so much of me is wrong. Out of place. You might be too late.
You know me. When I make a promise.
You keep it. I do know how to pick 'em.
I'll discuss the score at length later, but what I will say is that Keep What You Steal, the track that plays when you find Cortana in this cutscene, is one of my favorite tracks on this entire soundtrack. Now that you're reunited with Cortana, she helps you destroy High Charity's reactor, and as you escape, Arbiter arrives to help you. With the gang back together, it's finally time to actually finish the fight. For the second time in the Halo series, we play through a mission called Halo, the final mission of Halo 3. Your Pelican crash lands, so you have to make your way to the control room on foot. The replacement ring is unfinished, and you can really tell as you explore the level. Recognizable iconography of the Halo rings is present, but things don't feel the same. Of course, the Flood weren't all actually destroyed with High Charity, so they work to stop you on your slow ascent up the mountain. You're aided by the Sentinels and Johnson, who has a very important Spartan laser on your way up. Once you get inside the control room, Chief and Arbiter for some reason wait by the door, while Johnson and Guilty Spark go ahead to activate the ring. Spark tells Johnson here that the firing sequence will take several days, but Johnson does not have time for this.
Unacceptable! Unacceptable! Absolutely unacceptable! Protocol dictates action! I see now that helping you was wrong! You are the child of my makers, inheritor of all they left behind. You are Forerunner. But this ring is mine.
So you finally get to kill the light bulb, but your weapons don't work against him. This boss battle with Guilty Spark can hardly actually be called that. It's incredibly difficult for him to actually hurt you, and you just have to wait it out for Johnson to incapacitate him with his laser. After you take Johnson's laser, just a few shots will do the trick, and that's that for Guilty Spark. Johnson succumbs to his wounds, and his death is unfortunately another that feels like it's really trying to force an emotional moment into a game that doesn't have much emotion in it. Chief and Cortana activate the ring, and it's time to book it. Johnson very conveniently left a Warhawk behind, and since this is the end of a Halo game, you know what comes next. The Halo 3 Warthog run is, in my opinion, the superior one. Halo 1 gets points for being the first to do it, but Halo 3 takes the cake thanks to its pure spectacle and added stakes. Watching the entire ring destroy itself around you is more visually appealing than just the interior of the Autumn exploding, and having one final moment of Chief and Arbiter fighting together is much appreciated. You, of course, have to gun it and make one last huge jump. This cutscene has a few of my favorite moments in the entire franchise. Chief and Arbiter's final nods to each other communicate so much between two characters that are so connected, but don't actually speak much to each other. It's a perfect encapsulation of their dynamic and a fitting final moment between the two. The other moment is an obvious one. I know it's a contrived setup to get to this shot, but just look at this shot. The Forward into Dawn makes its way through the portal right as the ring explodes, and then we cut to black. On Earth, we see part of the ship come through, and only Arbiter emerge from the wreckage. No Chief. In our epilogue, Lord Hood honors those that were lost in the war. A final handshake seals the truce between the humans and elites, and Arbiter returns to his home planet with the elites.
Take us home.
Oh, you thought that was it?
Chief? Can you hear me? I thought I'd lost you too. Truth and the Covenant, the Flood, it's finished.
It's finished.
I'll drop a beacon, but it'll be a while before anyone finds us.
Years, even. I'll miss you.
Wake me when you need me.
And that was Halo 3. If you beat the game on Legendary, you get a hint at what may be next for the Master Chief, but to reference Star Wars again, this ends the original trilogy. So let's talk big picture. I only have praise for Halo 3's gameplay. The weapon suite, both new and old, is incredibly impressive. Every weapon has its uses, even if some are clearly still better than others. I've talked about pacing a lot, but it's really worth reiterating that Halo 3 does blow the first two games out of the water in this regard. There are far fewer frustrating or repetitive battles here, and it always feels like you're making forward progress, while the first two games had constant moments of feeling stuck and at the game's mercy. Every other campaign in the entire series has at least one mission that makes me think, God, I really don't want to play that one right now. Halo 3 does not have this problem. I can't count how many times I've started Halo 3 just to mess around and wound up finishing the whole campaign in a day. It's endlessly replayable for me. As for the combat itself, Brutes might not be as dynamic an enemy to fight as the Elites, but they're more than serviceable as a main adversary here. Chieftains add another wrinkle to combat, and scattering enjoyable mini-bosses throughout with a cool weapon pickup at the end, or a cool power-up as a reward, is a welcome inclusion. The rest of the Covenant adversaries feel as enjoyable to fight as ever, and the Flood have been perfected as much as they can be. They're still less enjoyable to fight, but their battles aren't the significant downgrade they were in Halo 1 and 2. There is one gameplay element I didn't have a proper place to discuss, so I'll discuss it here. A new addition for both single and multiplayer is equipment. You can hold one piece of equipment at a time, and each has its strategic uses in battle. Trip mines blow up enemies upon contact. Bubble shields drop a stationary circular shield around you for a set time. Flares blind enemies, but mostly blind you. Deployable covers put an energy shield in front of you, but leave you vulnerable from every other angle. Gravity lifts help you get to those hard-to-reach places. Power drains take out shields of anything close proximity, including you, leaving only the killing blow. Regenerators bring your shields back without the usual waiting period. Radar jammers are like flares in that they affect both the player and the adversary. Jammers and flares only really feel useful in multiplayer since you're facing actual people. In campaign, they only tangibly affect you. Auto turrets can be used as a quick distraction. Cloaking is the new evolution of active camouflage, which still operates for a limited time but is a pickup now instead of a built-in feature. Lastly, there's invincibility, which is largely, if not entirely, a pickup from chieftains after you kill them. If they activate it before you can kill them, you can't pick it up. Equipment would evolve into armor abilities in later games, and while I appreciate that you'll know an enemy will always have at least one of these abilities equipped at all times, I do think I prefer equipment's implementation overall. They're not all winners, but the added element of knowing that you only have one use of whatever you have on you and deciding not just when to use it, but whether to use it or to trade it for another piece of equipment adds a welcome element of extra strategy to battle in both single player and multiplayer. That's a lot of gameplay chat, but what about the story? I talked earlier about there being too many cooks in the kitchen during campaign development. Legendary composer and jack of all trades of Bungie, Marty O'Donnell, has been credited as the one who stepped up and made the changes to the initial outline of Halo 3's story.
It's like, I think it needs more punch.
Unacceptable! Unacceptable!
What it really needs is some death.
You actually want to get to the point where the player goes, well, wait a minute, I've been this character for 3 games. They can't possibly kill me.
By having the reality of death a part of the story, it did actually introduce this tone of heroism.
There's no sense of heroic action if there's no real consequences.
We have 2 major character deaths in Halo 3's third act, Keyes and Johnson. Keyes' death quite literally comes out of nowhere. You have no idea where she's physically been throughout the level when she suddenly comes storming through the Citadel on a one-woman crusade. The documentary talks about how these deaths are supposed to introduce a tone of heroism. She does get a clear hero moment here, but the entire scene feels so rushed and out of place, and her death ultimately feels inconsequential. Truth just shoots her from behind with fewer spiker shots than it would take to kill a grunt in the campaign, and then just continues on with what he was doing. Johnson's demise later in the game is more consequential on the surface. We've spent more time with him in these games, so our initial reaction to his death is greater, but there's not much more to it beyond that initial response. His death is also a very silly one in execution. Getting zapped by a comedic relief robot that everyone knows will betray you is not exactly what I'd do if I wanted to capture a tone of heroism. Both deaths feel like the actual events of the story were altered in incredibly minor ways to put some plot-related characters on the chopping block and to make the story feel more impactful than it actually is. Marty's assessment of Halo 3's story rings true for me, but it still absolutely feels like the game we got was at best a minorly tweaked version of that original outline. The rest of the campaign outside of Chief and Cortana's reunion feels very hollow. Not much is actually happening in the narrative itself. I talked about how the Earth missions accomplish very little for the story, and that's the entire first half of the game. This game is so backloaded on its plot points and story beats that none of them feel properly built up except that Cortana reunion, and even though I think the Cortana interruptions are an annoyance, they do at least still remind you of what you're fighting for, and you get some catharsis when you achieve your goal there. The rest of the game just feels like a lot of very lazy excuses to get you to the next cool gameplay section. I don't think it's too much for me to have wished for a little bit more here. I will at least give Marty credit for seeing the issue with the script, but recognizing a problem is not the same as fixing it. The ultimate fix that Bungie came up with was nothing more than a band-aid for a story that still lacks a lot of punch. Maybe it's a silly complaint to say that a game is too concerned with getting me back to the gameplay, but this series with this same core team showed they could handle a competent character arc in the last game despite its hellish development. Halo 2 was not the greatest gaming story ever told, but it did at least have interest in expanding the characterization of its villains, introducing political and religious themes, and developing its protagonists. And make no mistake, Arbiter was a protagonist of Halo 2, no matter who's on the box or who has the game's final line of dialogue. Halo 3 goes right back to Halo 1's level of simplicity. For some, that's a good thing. I personally still believe that Halo 3's gameplay with a story at Halo 2's level would make for the absolute perfect Halo campaign. As is, Halo 3 has insanely polished gameplay and extremely memorable, replayable levels that make up for the deficiencies in its storytelling. At the end of the day, gameplay is still king for me in a game like this, and this is easily my favorite campaign in the entire Halo franchise. Before I move on to multiplayer, I did want to shout out Marty O'Donnell and Michael Salvatori's score. I found it more difficult to discuss specific instances of music in Halo 3 than in the first two games. A key reason for this is simply that Halo 3 has fewer new inclusions to discuss. This game's score is largely a mashup and greatest hits of Halos 1 and 2. Tons of music from the first two games gets reused here, and while I'm not complaining since I think basically every track here is its best version in the series, it does create less to discuss. It's more of the same great music. That makes sense for a trilogy capper, but I understand frustration at the lack of new tracks. There are still a few new standouts though. As mentioned, I love Keep What You Steal, which itself is an altered version of One Final Effort, which is the closest thing Halo 3 has to a new main theme. I also love Farthest Outpost, the track from the opening cutscene of the Ark, which also gets expanded on in the credits. The remaining new tracks all work as ambient pieces, and because of the fusion of the best tracks from the first two games, this does feel more like a greatest hits album than its own soundtrack. Maybe I should be more critical of the lack of originality here, but at the end of the day, I'm just not going to be too upset at hearing some of the greatest gaming music of all time again. As a 9-year-old in 2007, I only dreamed of owning an Xbox 360, but that doesn't mean I didn't get my fix of Halo 3. My older cousins that hijacked my room for a Halo 2 LAN party in 2004 were luckily still into Halo in 2007. Whenever I visited their place, I played the 360 upstairs. Fast forward to Christmas 2010, and I finally had the 360 that I always wanted. I used some Christmas money to buy more games, including a very cheap used copy of Halo 3, which I still own to this day. This is how I first beat the campaign start to finish, but I was years away from playing it online. Whenever I would have friends over, we'd play split-screen campaign and multiplayer, but I still didn't have the internet. In 2013, we finally got Wi-Fi, and I played Halo 4. Yeah, those final two Bungie games had since released, and Halo 3's direct follow-up had finally hit shelves 5 full years later. It was safe to say a lot had changed for Halo by this point, and Halo 3 was definitely not the king of online gaming anymore in 2013. But the servers were still up, as they would be until a couple years ago. You could still get some matches going easily enough. Although I didn't get to play it in its heyday, I am proud to say that I actually got to play the original version of Halo 3 online. So let's talk about what it had to offer. Halo 3 had 11 maps at launch: Construct, Epitaph, Guardian, High Ground, Isolation, Last Resort, Narrows, Sandtrap, Snowbound, The Pit, and Valhalla. Not a bad crop to have on day one. I do think there are a few standouts here. Firstly, we have a few remakes. Last Resort is a very faithful remake of Zanzibar from Halo 2 with a much clearer focus on using this size for big team matches. Valhalla is essentially Halo 3's version of Blood Gulch in structure and design, but it's a bit more confined with more avenues to move around and a much different aesthetic this time. The Pit is one of Halo's most iconic maps to this day. It's a UNSC training ground with multiple pathways, power weapons scattered throughout, and multiple areas to use the high ground to your advantage. Speaking of which, high ground is one of my personal favorites. One team starts at the top of a hill and the other at the bottom on the beach shore. Small vehicles reside at either end, and power weapons are waiting for you at the gate in the middle, including a chair and a Spartan laser. Narrows has an upper and lower level connected by bridges in the middle and man cans on either side for quick repositioning. Sandtrap is best known for the Elephant. It's a very big and very slow vehicle with turrets on the sides. It's another fun big team map. Expansive DLC released gradually over the first 2 years for Halo 3. 4 paid DLC map packs and 1 free downloadable map made up 13 of the game's 24 maps, including several remakes. The free map, Cold Storage, is another faithful remake, this time of Chill Out from Halo 1. Avalanche is a spiritual successor to Sidewinder from Halo 1. Other remakes include Blackout and Heretic, which are remakes of Lockout and Midship from Halo 2 respectively. As for original DLC maps, Standoff is the most common big team battle map in Master Chief Collection these days. It's another spiritual Blood Gulch successor. You have 2 big bases at either end, each with a Warthog and a Spartan laser waiting for you in the middle. There's lots of rocks in between the 2 bases to provide you some cover on foot. Rat's Nest is another big team map that's aesthetically very similar to the Crow's Nest level from the campaign. The outer circle of the map is a figure 8 for vehicle battles with a center area for on-foot combat. The center area is used more for objective modes like Assault and Capture the Flag. I've mentioned basically all the maps I really enjoy in Halo 3 here. The selection of maps is solid, but there are a handful I don't really care for or just find forgettable. Assembly feels like a weaker version of Heretic or Midship to me. Orbital has a cool space station aesthetic, but is my least favorite to actually play on. Citadel is one of the most uninspired maps in the entire series to me, almost entirely ripping off an area from the Covenant level. Longshore is a decent big team map, but just doesn't compare to the rest of the suite. Ghost Town's another map based on a campaign area, Sierra 117. It has several layers of verticality, which adds to strategy but also can feel frustrating to play on at times for me. A testament to the enduring popularity of Halo 3 is that nearly 15 years later, it received 3 new maps on Master Chief Collection. We of course had another remake in Icebox, which is a faithful one of Turf from Halo 2. We also had 2 original maps brought over from Halo Online, a multiplayer-focused game intended for PC with 343 and Saber Interactive working on it in the 2010s before it ultimately got scrapped. Halo Online is actually a very important point in the franchise's history. El Dorado, which was an incredibly popular Halo Online fan mod, is what 343 credits with giving them the kick in the pants to bring MCC over to PC, which they ultimately did in 2019 and 2020. The 2 maps imported from Halo Online, Waterfall and Edge, are perfectly solid. There's largely just a novelty factor here. It's just cool to be playing something new in Halo 3 after so many years. Even if these aren't 2 of the most memorable maps in the game, the fact that they exist is enough and also shows the popularity of this game so many years later. We have a few particularly important DLC maps to mention. As part of the Heroic map pack, Bungie released Foundry. Foundry's default configuration is an empty warehouse with snipers in the corners and a rocket launcher in the middle. The default configuration is also used frequently for regular 4v4 games in MCC, but at the time, Foundry was meant for something else. It was the first map released for Halo 3 with its brand new Forge mode in mind. Forge is Halo's multiplayer map editor, which gives players freedom to remove or add assets into multiplayer arenas, including weapons, vehicles, scenery, and terrain. You can customize the existing maps to a degree, but Foundry was designed to be more of a blank slate to give greater customization options. You can remove the building blocks in the middle level to create an empty canvas in Sandbox. This allows you to place twice as many walls as Foundry, and provides a grid when you're building in Forge. Most Forge maps in regular multiplayer and custom games are based on these 2 maps, and later on Halo Reach and Halo 4 would follow with their own dedicated Forge maps. Forge is one of Halo's most important innovations and has become a staple of the series ever since. If you're someone who gets tired of typical Halo multiplayer, Forge can add exponential value. It not only allows for players to express their creativity, but gives them infinitely more options to play with. Forge's inclusion led to official Forge creations to be added to regular multiplayer in subsequent mainline entries. Its real contribution, though, is to custom games, both at home and online. Perhaps the biggest innovation was the file share feature, which allows players to upload saved game types and map variants for anyone to download and use for themselves. I can't draw on too many personal experiences with custom games from Halo 3's heyday, but playing it the last few years on MCC's custom game browser, I'm reminded just how important Forge has been. Playing modes like Giant Jenga with friends reminds me how much fun Halo can be when it's just being silly. Forge is just the perfect storm, with genuine creativity from the community that creates goofy and fun gameplay situations that extend the life of Halo for years. The additions didn't stop with Forge either. As I mentioned earlier, Halo 2 was meant to have a saved films feature where players could save gameplay clips, but it was ultimately cut like many features of that game. This feature was finally implemented in Halo 3 as Theater. The 25 most recent campaign levels or multiplayer games are saved to the Theater for viewing, and Halo 3 allowed up to 100 films to be saved. You could free roam around the area and record specific clips to your heart's desire. The greater freedom of theater mode made producing machinimas much easier, and as a result, further strengthened the online Halo community. That right there might be Halo 3's real lasting legacy, the community. The multiplayer itself was obviously popular, but connecting players further through file sharing, custom games, and machinima helped Halo take a massive step forward as the internet itself was evolving. All these elements led to the creation of Griffball, for example. What was just an Assault game type variant on a Foundry map variant became a fan favorite mode that was officially added in subsequent games, while also referencing Halo's most popular machinima. Features like these would be crucial to keeping Halo games alive for years while fans waited for the next new game. Halo 3's popularity endured well after the next main entry in the series hit shelves 3 years later, and it still endures to this day. I talked about having issues finding big team games in Halo 1 and 2 and Master Chief Collection, but I have no such issue with Halo 3. This is by far the most popular game in that collection, which I think speaks for its legacy more than anything else. I really think Halo 3 came out at the perfect time. I was 9 years old, and people my age and a little bit older were starting to get into more mature games. The generation above me, who played Halos 1 and 2 as teenagers, were still young enough that they were still gaming when Halo 3 rolled around. Halo 3 was the biggest the series ever felt, and those who still play the games today have an attachment to Halo 3 that they just don't seem to other entries in the series. I've talked a lot about the features and overall legacy of Halo 3's multiplayer, but how does it actually play? Well, I love the gameplay and campaign, and that's still true for multiplayer. The game feels so good mechanically that I really can't complain much here. As for my own personal multiplayer playstyle, I mentioned earlier that my bread and butter is to do some damage with my weapon before getting close for the melee kill. The assault rifle is perfect for this. Meleeing feels more viable as a multiplayer strategy than it did in Halo 1 or 2. Both games felt kinda jank with their melee mechanics in PvP, but Halo 3 fixed this. Like I said, the weapons all feel viable in some way. The battle rifle is still my go-to if it's team BRs, but if it's regular Slayer with your starting weapons being the assault rifle and the Magnum, I will go for dual-wielding Magnums if I can. Usually the type of Slayer that you play will be determined by the size of the map you're on. Dual-wielding Magnums is obviously better in close quarters, and the battle rifle is obviously better from mid or long range. I will say, needing to slightly lead your shots with the battle rifle now makes me enjoy it less than Halo 2's, even if it is still my go-to here. I have my issues with some of the maps like I said, but Halo 3's multiplayer is just a well-oiled machine. Whether it's 4v4 or big team battle, every game feels perfectly tuned. The weapon and vehicle placements just feel right. Even if I don't enjoy them all, I can't deny that the maps feel perfectly designed to ensure the right pacing. If I'm having a bad time, it's because I'm not playing well, or because a teammate rage quit and left us at a disadvantage. It's almost never an issue with how the game is designed or how it plays mechanically, and that's one of the best compliments I can give it. Anytime I boot up Master Chief Collection, I just search for a Halo 3 game by default. When I think of Halo, I think of Halo 3. For a long time, it wasn't actually my favorite. At various points in my life, I've loved other games in the series more, particularly Halo 2, which was my childhood favorite as I've discussed here before. The older I've gotten, the more I see the imperfections in the Halo games. The one game this doesn't really happen with is Halo 3. Halo 3 doesn't really show its age to me like 1 and 2 have. The newer hardware is partially to thank for that, but this game just holds up better than later entries in its own series. The multiplayer is timeless and helped innovate online community features that are mainstays in Halo and that a ton of online shooters have adopted since. The campaign may not be as successful with its storytelling as its predecessor, but it's still a total blast to play through, and it's one that I can play in my sleep any day. My issues with the story aside, this is the first time in the Halo series that I don't feel like I'm playing a compromised version of the game. I feel like for better or worse, this was what the devs intended this game to be. And to their credit, it's almost entirely for the better. Halo 3 was Halo's peak. Not just the best-selling game in the series, but the height of its cultural power. It came out at the right time, one of the first true huge exclusives on an incredibly popular new console. The marketing campaign was one of an entity at the height of its power, capitalizing on the craze. Microsoft knew what they had and were desperate for more. Halo 3 felt like the biggest thing going. No first-person shooter series could ever feel bigger than this. Until 2 months later. Looks like a whole new fight just started, huh? Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next time with Halo 3 ODST.